The original scrap Fallout Van Buren has some game design documents that were leaked to the public. Many of these concepts made their way to New Vegas, but many more did not. Some of the ones that did make it were altered. However, we're going to focus on the things that didn't make the cut. Here are 5 interesting, unused Van Buren ideas. Note that a lot of the images used in design documents come from various sources. They were only meant to be used internally and never meant to be released publicly. Let's start with a rather interesting faction, the Daughters of Hecate. In a way, you can kind of think of them like the female equivalent to Caesar's Legion. They both assimilated tribes into their ranks, but rather than absorbing a tribe through war, the Daughters of Hecate swelled their numbers through religious prowess and selective breeding. The story actually starts with the rise of Caesar's Legion. Much like the New Vegas counterpart, the Legion rolled over and assimilated the Twisted Hares, as they have done to several tribes before them. In Van Buren, there was a woman survivor who fled and traveled to various tribes, asking for assistance. Each, however, rejected her as cursed, marked by Caesar. Eventually, the woman collapsed in a desert, close to a place called the Nursery. She was, fittingly enough, nursed back to health by a woman, well, a robo-brain, named Diana, who gave the cursed Night Mother the name Hecate. Diana taught Hecate a variety of medical practices, including herbal treatment and livestock breeding. Eventually, Hecate, donned with her face paint so she would be unrecognizable to the various tribes, and braided hair, returned to the tribes that rejected her and assisted them with her newfound knowledge. She gained their trust and began to speak of a religion surrounding her death and rebirth. She created a matriarchy, having the tribal women follow her into forming the Daughters of Hecate. They went out and assisted the other tribes. Eventually, the Daughters of Hecate could decide who could marry and who could breed. Only daughters could give birth at a specialized tent. The infants who were deemed best by the daughters were kept. The weak were given to the other tribes. When the other tribes were weak, the Hounds of Hecate, comprised of former members of the Vipers, rained death upon the weakened tribes. Hecate kept her rule by using fear of her goddess status among the tribals. Those who disobeyed the Night Mother were stricken ill or impotent. Her selective breeding habits kept her tribe extremely healthy in comparison to the average wastelander. Her rise to power was slow, but stable. Using this method, she would set her eyes on one target, Caesar's Legion. She dedicated her reign to seeking vengeance upon the ones who destroyed her tribe. Speaking of Caesar's Legion, let's talk about a Legion-aligned companion, Alexandra. Alexandra wasn't really a legionary, but a bounty hunter. Still, it does seem like the Legion in Van Buren was at least more open to working with women. She was raised in New Canaan and grew up Mormon. She was skilled in medical matters, but always was a bad seed and left home at the age of 16. She joined a caravan and eventually branched out to other careers, such as a caravan guard and, of course, the bounty hunter job. She'll also heal people, but only for money. She's not particularly interested in helping the sick, but certainly not the healthy. Those who are mostly okay could solve their own problems. The Van Buren protagonist, the prisoner, was meant to find her cornering a super mutant named Blackjack that had a bounty on his head from the Legion. Alexandra took the opportunity when she found him traveling alone. She could be persuaded to join the prisoner, or the prisoner could assist her in capturing Blackjack and dumping him off at the Legion, netting the bounty. She'd then be allowed to join, having no further obligations. There's no image for Alexandra, but she was described as a woman in her late 20s with short, dirty blonde hair tied back into a ponytail. She wore denim jeans, a t-shirt, a cowboy hat, and a duster. To me, she kind of sounds like her description inspired a design, a Rose of Sharon Cassidy, though Cass had brown hair rather than blonde. That being said, her promotional art does appear to have blonde hair. Speaking of Cass, she shares something similar to the next companion, Kurisu, an attendant companion that shares a relationship with the companion of Fallout 2. Cass is the daughter of John Cassidy, an older bartender with a shotgun and heart problems. Kurisu was meant to be the sister of Solek. In Fallout 2, Solek was trying to find her as she was captured by slavers. However, despite the power of Grampy Bone, he was never able to track her down. Kurisu in the quest line was cut before Fallout 2 was shipped, but she was meant to appear in Van Buren as the leader of the Blackfoot tribe, which hasn't been destroyed by Caesar in Van Buren, while in New Vegas the Blackfoots were the first tribe that Caesar took control of. Still, despite them not being under control, the Blackfoot tribe was meant to work with Caesar's legion. The Blackfoots had an interesting culture in Van Buren. Slaves of the tribe were treated fairly well, and skilled slaves were able to actually earn reputation and eventually work their way into freedom, though they traded some slaves with the legion. Kurisu was one of the slaves of the tribe, who was able to prove her worth and earn her freedom. She became a Blackfoot raider, and when the old leader died, she assumed control of the tribe. Kurisu has been bitter for a long time that her brother never saved her from the slavers. She hates her tribal roots, is an excellent slaver, and has several house husbands. The player was also meant to be able to become one of her house husbands. The player could do several quests for her and even save her soul, which would help her look past her bitterness about Solok's failure to save her and allow her to cease slaving, or damn her soul, which makes her even more invested in her bitterness and worsen her slaving behavior. Her home was to be right next to the hangdog shaman, a daughter of Hecate named Marin, who was having a lot of trouble influencing the tribe leader with her religion. As stated, she could become a companion. In some documents, it suggested that one could recruit Kurisu and leave them without a leader, or replace them with Chagas, the brother of the former leader. There was also the idea that the player would take control of the tribe, but the quest was notably marked out, suggesting that in this stage of development, the idea was going to be cut. So, not all of these ideas are necessarily good, but interesting. I mentioned this a couple of times on my channel, though I suppose I could go a little bit more in detail here. The Born ghouls were a species of ghouls that were, exactly as one would expect from the title, born rather than created through radiation. They were a product of science. The Born ghouls were to be found at the reservation. The reservation, formerly known as Los Alamos Nuclear Testing Facility, was a top-secret military and nuclear research facility before the bombs dropped. The reservation became host to a number of normal ghouls created through radiation during the war. About 10 years after the war, a dozen or so ghouls set out to the wasteland. Among them was a scientist named William Clark. Clark eventually came back with about 50 ghouls, but none of his companions survived the journey. He saw firsthand the prejudice that ghouls faced and vowed that the facility would become the reservation for ghouls, the children of the wasteland. He preached a lot about the ghouls' right to rule and mandated that all future research be stored at the reservation's computer system. While they weren't planning an invasion, they did feel that eventually humans or mutants would invade the reservation and wipe out all the ghouls. So this paranoia fueled a bit of an arms race for the ghouls of the reservation. They researched a number of weapons and technologies and, as is obvious by the title of the section, a way for ghouls to procreate. Dr. Sebastian was a ghoul and former plastic surgeon in charge of the research. He was found by William Clark in the desert, desperately trying to graft smooth human skin to himself, to at least pass for a human. Clark taught him to accept his ghoulish form, and to see it as the evolution of humanity. Clark and Sebastian concluded the best way to solve ghoul sterility would be to use humans as the catalyst. Dr. Sebastian is not only zealous thanks to Clark, devoting his life to the research for curing ghoul sterility, but also very malicious. He's sadistic and enjoys tormenting his victims. He operated on many humans and had only a 2% birth rate among the ghouls. The Born ghouls are described as being a little stronger, faster, and tougher than the average ghoul. They age very quickly, reaching adulthood in a single month, and their lesions, expelled bows, and hair patches are very uniform and look like they even serve some kind of purpose. The documents have conflicting information about how many Born ghouls there were, but it's between 3 and 4. There's only 2 important ones, however, Bell and Measles. Measles was to be a companion, a weak-looking Born ghoul, but highly dangerous, using his appearance as an advantage, catching his opponents off guard, and gifted to hand-to-hand combat. He also has 2 swollen tumors on his neck that look like he had measles, hence the name. He was a personal bodyguard to William Clark. That said, he really hated humans, but was asked to accompany the prisoner and hoping to gain insight about the human settlements around. William Clark wanted to know how big, how organized, and most importantly, if any of them were a threat to the reservation. Then there was Belle, a disturbingly attractive female Born ghoul even to humans. She was meant to be approachable by the player when other ghouls wouldn't give the prisoner the time of day. And if the prisoner had a charisma less than 4, very homely looking, they could have relations with Belle, even causing her to get pregnant. Very interesting idea. So, the Gehenna was meant to be a type of creature that appeared in Burham Springs. They were described as being slightly larger than humans, and appeared to be made of black tar and shiny oil. Their eyes were bulbous glowing orange spears that seemed to be stuck to their ovoid heads. Gehennas are dangerous both in their fiery melee attacks and toxic fumes that they could breathe onto enemies. When they died, they were supposed to collapse into a disgusting pile of smoking black goo. Then there was the Molechs, which was described as being similar in appearance to Gehennas, but less humanoid and more monstrous. They did not have identified eyes, but small glowing green spears of various sizes poked out from their skin all over their bodies. Their long, serpent-like necks had a head that were essentially just huge fanged mouths. Molechs were supposed to spray streams of toxic bile from the green spears, and, unsurprisingly, they were supposed to bite. The Gehenna itself looks vaguely like Fallout 76 Grafton Monster, at least at first glance. Of course, the Grafton Monster is from actual folklore, described by a 1964 reporter as being 9 feet tall, 4 feet wide, being stark white, and having slick seal-like skin, and no head. There's a noticeable amount of differences between the Grafton Monster and the Gehennas: no bulbous orange eyes, larger hands, and smoother skin. And between the Molechs promotional artwork and the Gehenna's concept art, we could probably get a better idea of what the Gehenna was supposed to look like, seeing as they were described in Van Buren as being similar in appearance. But still, I like to think Gehenna partly inspired the Grafton Monster of 76, but it's more likely coincidental than intentional.